Hi everyone and welcome to another video. This is Dr. Stefan, and in this video I'd like to discuss a little bit about spacers and how often should you replace your spacer. This comes from a comment that I received in the comment section. So what are the risks of not replacing your spacer? This comes from Jeroen Jansen. I can't find any research about the exact reason why they should be replaced every year, and I had a patient who didn't want a new one because of environmental reasons. So again, interesting take. I didn't think about this actually beforehand, so this is a great question that I received. Now, spacers are these bulky things. They come in different shapes and sizes and forms, etc., but they basically help you take your inhaler medication in a little bit more of an efficient way. So you would generally connect an inhaler that looks like this one, where you would need to synchronize your breathing with this puff that comes out, and you would just connect it here. And it does allow you, if you release the medication within this space, it allows you to inhale it in a more efficient way because you are not inhaling the large particles that come out of this little thing, and you're just inhaling the little fine particles that can penetrate deep within the lungs and actually help you treat your condition better. It's very useful to have one of these, for example, if you are on corticosteroid inhalers, so inhaled corticosteroids, because that's where the large particles are not really helpful because they just deposit themselves on the large airways or in the at the back of your throat, and it can cause some complications. So they are quite useful things to have around the house. And actually, in many countries around the world, these are not readily available. And this may come to you as a surprise if you live in the United States or Europe or a developed country. It might be that you're not thinking that, well, some people don't have access to these things. But actually, in some countries, they're really, really hard to find. So this is why, for me, this question is a little bit surprising, because if you think about it, if you're replacing one of these every year, it means that you have access to plenty of them. So this is great. And I think it's a good idea to replace it every now and then. Should you do it every year? I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case. So first of all, coming back to the question a little bit, research about the exact reason why they should be replaced. I don't know of any research directly, and I think that such research would be very hard to do because you can imagine there would be millions of these things out there being used by various patients in different households, different circumstances. So it's really, really hard from a real life perspective to figure out how these things are actually used, because everyone will keep it at home. Some will keep it on top of their cupboard, some will keep it in a drawer, some will keep it on the floor. You never know. So how clean or dirty it will be very, very variable. So again, it's really hard to find research probably that is of good quality in this field, because it's just one of these real life situations where you use them in different ways. But I would say personally, from a personal perspective, as long as you keep these things relatively clean, you could probably use it indefinitely as long as it's not broken and you're inhaling the medication correctly. Why am I saying this? First of all, normally these things, especially like the large ones, like this one, like this volumatic one, you can actually take it apart quite easily. It just breaks in two. It's quite big. You can get your hand in there and really wash all the nooks and crannies. So if you wash it with soapy water, you clean it out really well, and you let it dry out on a piece of towel or piece of tissue paper, it should be relatively clean. And if you can imagine, the medication that you're inhaling is not actually the stuff that is deposited on the walls of the spacer. So when you puff the medication inside, let me just show you, you are only inhaling the small particles that come in the center of the spacer. So you're just inhaling the stuff that comes out of the inhaler. You're not actually, taking in bits that have touched the walls of the inhaler. So as long as this is clean when you use it, you've just taken it off the tissue paper after you've cleaned it, the only bit that's actually in contact with your mouth is this mouthpiece. But everything else should be very clean. So that's why I don't know if replacing it every year is absolutely necessary as long as you keep it clean. And again, from an environmental perspective, I'm no environmentalist, I'm a doctor, but I would imagine that, of course, if you have one of these thrown out every year from 50 million people, you will have a lot of these in dumps around the world. And this is a big problem, actually, that's being addressed slowly at the moment, the idea of trying to recycle inhalers. Because if you can imagine, that you've got maybe 500 million people with respiratory disease around the world, or more, probably. If everyone's throwing out an inhaler every month, because this is usually prescribed for a month or 2 months or something like that, you can see how easily these will build up over time in various places. And if we can't recycle them, because generally medical devices are not easily recyclable for obvious reasons, infection prevention, etc., it does become a bit of a problem. So I think there are some moves nowadays to move towards a more environmentally friendly medical care, but it's difficult. And I would say one thing here, though. I would prioritize the care of your conditions with the available devices that we have, be it spacers or inhalers. I wouldn't necessarily think about the dangers of throwing these sort of things away. Because if you imagine one example, if your condition is not well controlled and you need to go into hospital, when you get into the hospital, you'll probably need to use a lot of devices. A lot of things will have to be used that are single use, that have to be thrown away. Now, hospitals are not the most environmentally friendly places in the world. So I think this is just my little take on inhalers. If you keep it clean, probably fine. If you have one of these that's actually a little bit more difficult to clean inside, so there are different models, maybe with this one you might want to consider changing it more often. But it depends on the type of inhaler you've got, how well you can keep it clean. I think that's the only thing. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll hope to see you in future videos. If you have further questions, do leave them in the comment section below. All the best. Good health.